Thank you so much, Pamela. Thank you to Graham for having me here. It's so much fun and such an honor to be sitting here with Mary Heilmann. Mary has said in her wonderful book, The All-Night Movie, the following: "Each of my pictures can be seen as an autobiographical marker, a cue by which I evoke a moment from my past or my projected future, each a charm to conjure a mental reality and to give it physical form." It's a wonderful quote, and I'd like to use this as the structure for what we're going to talk about today as we look at Mary's pictures and work and talk about her story. So right now, Mary, we're looking at a photograph of the University of California at Berkeley, where you went to school in the early 60s and studied ceramics and sculpture. And I know that David Hockney had a studio on the campus at the time. And I was wondering if you could talk about what he was working on at the time that interested you.
Well, let me see. Now, I'm doing sculpture at Berkeley, and I'm trying to be radical and far out, as we used to say then. And we were all sculptors, and we hated painting. We really looked down at the painters. And then David Hockney came as a visiting artist, and it was like 65. He was huge then. And so they had a meeting of the people in the art department, and they said, only painters can take David Hockney's class. And so they said, now who in this room is a painter? And we all raised our hands. And we got away with it. In fact, I was going to say rude things about the painters. They didn't actually, I don't know, they didn't know how awesome he was, you know. And he was only about 3 years older than we were, and he was fantastic. And he was a great teacher. He was working, he had a studio right there in the main thing he taught us, I have to say this, the main thing he taught us was how it was to be gay, because 65, we hardly knew about that, you know? And he's all dressed in real orange clothes with green shoes and had beautiful bleach blonde hair and big, you know how he looks. So anyway, he had a studio there, and he was painting these Los Angeles paintings of the swimming pools, and the main one was the Bigger Splash. And he would take and so he's really radical and advanced in his thinking, but also really painting in an old-fashioned way. But he'd take a straw and blow the paint, the oil paint, to make the splash. Yeah. And he was all proud of that. And he'd let us go in and talk to him and hang out in the studio, girls and boys, both.
And you also studied ceramics with Peter Volkas, and you've talked about how he introduced you to the aesthetic quality called wabi-sabi.
Oh, right,
I was
right.
wondering if you could talk about what that meant for you.
So Peter Volkas, and we called him Pete. Pete Volkas was this really wild guy who had gone over after the war in the 50s. He went over to Japan to see what was going on in ceramics there, and got very inspired by this kind of attitude, which is called wabi-sabi. And so in his class, he would throw this massive pot and it was an electric potter's wheel, the beginning of those, threw this big, huge pot, like about as tall as this table, and he'd take it off the wheel, and we'd all be watching him, and he'd walk across, he'd have those pointed beetle boots shoes on, and he'd be walking across the room, and then he'd drop it, like by accident. And then we'd go, then he'd pick it up and squish it around and make it into another sculpture.
Wow.
Yeah. And that was that attitude, kind of a Buddhist attitude. We didn't know that then, but although Buddhist culture was around then in San Francisco because of the beatniks, and this kind of thing that he found out about in Japan influenced him. Mm-hmm. Oh, one other thing. He went to Black Mountain just before that, and as a teacher, and got very inspired by the abstract expressionists in the late 50s, I think. Yeah, so he was a good teacher.
And you also met Bruce Nauman when you were there. He was at UC Davis at the time.
Right.
And you've talked about how he gave you artistic permission. I was wondering if you could talk about
like
that.
So I'm going to just show the next picture. So I'm doing sculpture at Berkeley, and a lot of the guys teaching there were coming out of the New York school, and this is a David Smith. This is the kind of sculpture they wanted us to do. Welded steel, cast bronze, and I did it. You know, I did all that kind of, learned all those techniques, and then plastic got invented, epoxy and polyester resin and fiberglass, and so I wanted to do this kind of sculpture. And these two works, what I see here, came after I was having a really hard time at Berkeley, and someone said, oh, you should go up to Davis and study with William Wiley. And then Bruce and that's right up the road from Berkeley. Bruce Nauman was in school there, and he was already doing really radical fiberglass sculpture. And he was my same generation, both in graduate school. So we then, with the three of us, Bruce, me, and Wiley, started hanging out together. That was awesome.
So these are from 67 to 70, and during this period,
Ballpark,
after you finished at Berkeley, you moved to New York?
Right. Let's see what happens. Oh, this is me trying to be radical at Berkeley. They're stars. They're socks stuffed with, like you make a doll out of socks, only stuck, and then I stuffed the socks with cotton, and then put glitter all over them, and then put these bamboo poles there to make them be on the ceiling to be the sky. They didn't like that. But it was pretty good. I'm pretty proud of it, too, you can see there. This came a little later. This is called The Sculpture of Night, same idea. But anyway, what was that?
Yeah, so you moved to New York after you studied at Berkeley, and you were a friend of Richard Serra.
Right, and this I made as soon as I got to New York. I made this sculpture. And this is sort of going on. Everybody sort of found out. Richard went out to California and found out about those guys in California when he was still at Yale, actually. That was radical, because Yale, they weren't doing that kind of work at Yale either. So, yeah, Richard was my friend from college and even high school.
And you started spending time at Max's Kansas City at that time.
Yeah.
It was 1968, the same year that Andy Warhol was shot.
That's right, before we got here, before I got here, yes.
So what was the scene like there at Max's
So
Kansas
he wasn't there
City?
anymore. Okay, so, yeah, and I found out about Max's through Richard, because he had already been here a while. And so we went there, and actually I just heard Bryce Marden give a talk the other night, and he was talking about how the guys got in these big fights in Max's, even pushed each other around a little bit. And so it was this really intense, old-fashioned barroom kind of scene there. And we'd all get a little bit drunk, kind of very drunk. And so I'm this girl artist in my 20s, young lady, and I want to be in with the guys. Wasn't happening. So then I would try to get into these arguments too, say something that would get their attention, Yeah.
What was the nature of those arguments?
Well, I remember sitting with Smithson, and he was really super tough. Anyway, I said and I liked him. I wanted him to like me. I said, oh, well, my teacher was David Hockney. He said, I can't believe we're even talking about the guy. And you do that, you would say something like that just to get people mad. That's what Bryce was talking about the other night. Yeah, it was interesting. I hear that doesn't go on so much anymore. Not, right?
So somehow, despite this attitude, you moved into the world of painting. How did that happen?
And then that was the same thing. I wanted to have the kind of conversation that I was trying to get going with Smithson. I wanted to be in shows like in not primary structures, but the show that was at the Whitney that I think was Antiform. Mm-hmm. And Boyce was already having an influence, and Robert Morris was doing a lot of really, Barry LeVay was throwing stuff on the floor, Bruce was throwing stuff on the floor, so Richard was splashing lead. I wanted to be in the show too, but no, it wasn't happening. Mm. So I said, okay, I'll take up painting, mainly because it turns out it's all the same, mainly to be able to have those kind of conversations with the guys.
So do we have some of your early paintings here?
Let's see.
Okay, this is
a dog dish piece.
I think it's interesting because even in this very early piece, you're dealing with the idea of inverses.
Yeah.
It's such a theme in your work.
Yeah.
Even in this, this is from 1970?
This is a little later, but the ceramics has played a part in my work. Even, let's see what we get here. Even in the handling of materials. Like these are my first paintings, which are star paintings. I was all obsessed with stars and night. And they're not stretched at this point. This is made by folding the canvas to make the grid. Yeah, they're all made by folding the canvas and ironing it to make the grid. That's pretty feminist. And then the gold one is, and that is a cool thing about it, I'm ironing my canvas, and nobody's really seeing this work. This is just me figuring stuff out. So there they are again, star images, star figures, looking at the sky. This one's called the Big Dipper, and it's made out of clay. Okay, so then I make Moonlight Sea and Malibu. They're both made by using the paint to glue the canvas, to glue strips of the canvas on there on the left, and then to glue panels of canvas together, and that's supposed to represent the surf. So it's kind of verging from sculpture over into painting, because I thought you could just do whatever and call it painting, and then see what kind of a conversation you'd have. Well, it took a while, but it worked out eventually. And this one is from very early. It's made by gluing with fiberglass and resin the stretchers, the bars of wood across the back of the canvas. So it was a kind of an idea of making an image of the materials that you make painting out of. It was pretty clever. I long time ago saw it was auctioned off for around $150. And then I thought I would make it again, but it'd be really hard. It's pretty hard to make, so. And then this is the sky. It's called The Sky.
What are these pieces, Mary?
These are finger paintings, and the one on the left represents sheets on top of each other. So I think the bottom one was put on first, and then the next one, and they're finger paintings. So that would have been probably done with oil paint while it was wet. And then this is the same idea, that just another kind of one shot.
And so these pieces are from an early series that's called the Vent series, that's based
right.
on window frames and doorways.
And shutters, right. Actually, I was reading Rub Grier's Jealousy at the time, and thinking about the guy peeking out the shutter, being jealous. And then the images made by gluing canvas onto the face of the other canvas. So it's still building painting physically in a sculptural type of way. Like, I never really was interested in art history, and I came more out of sculpture, started with ceramics.
So were you thinking about fusing these mediums of sculpture and decorative arts and painting, or it just happened?
Right. I wasn't thinking about the high value of the cheesy crafts until lately. But
Until lately.
but it was just kind of an instinct to make paintings in a physical kind of sculptural way. I didn't sort of theoretically take it apart until lately.
Do you have that painting, Little 9 by 9,
Right,
which also becomes very object-like?
right.
It's coming up, I guess.
Yeah. It's coming up. This is a finger painting with these pieces, these triangles glued onto the canvas on the left, and then the other one's called Ties in the Closet, and the other one's called Empty. Doesn't have the ties there. And it's finger painting. And then here's some vents relating to jealousies. This one is one that's in Brooklyn now at the Brooklyn Museum. Where is that?
That's okay.
I think I will.
Were you showing these paintings, the finger paintings, and how did people react to them or respond
Let
to
me
them?
think. Yeah, I did get to show them a long time ago. Let's see. I was kicking this before. There was a gallery, Paley and Low, in the 70s. That was cool. Yeah, they came over, and that was nice. I showed this work. This reminds me of David Reed. The one on the left is called Shoot, and it's cute how phallic they are, too. I wasn't really aware of that at the time. Wasn't preoccupied with that. And so, yeah, they're made also kind of in a sculptural way by dragging the paint up there. So let's see. This is a drawing. Okay.
Was that done with finger painting as well?
No, actually, this is done with a pen, flow tip pen.
So you're dealing with this kind of free-form grid structure.
Yeah, it's gold. The ground is gold. I wish I still had that. We're going to get to the little. Well, let's
that's
just
okay.
zoom. 9 by 9. It's about 2 feet square, and it's a finger painting. It's got a system. The way the grid was put on there was systematically. You could figure that out. The last line is the far right side and the top. The very last line is the very top line, and it's acrylic paint. So I had to be pretty quick when I did that. And the lines go around the corner, and I still have that. I mean, it's still in the world, so that's cool. And the other thing is I'm teaching kids to make a living. I'm teaching little guys, preschool, like daycare. Wow. And so obviously I'm getting a few ideas from them.
Finger painting.
Yeah. It's huge in the way my work evolved, looking at little guys, yeah.
That's interesting. And then if we go back one, you were dealing, you start at this period to work with primary colors.
That's right. First, everything was earth colors and natural colors, and then all of a sudden, I thought, I wanted to use color. So I did a bunch of red, yellow, and blues. And they're systematic. The way the paintings is made is by painting the whole thing yellow. Let me see. Well, you can figure it out. Yeah. And I'll go back. Yeah, this is I think, first small 3 for red, yellow, and blue. And how is that? The whole thing is painted red, and then it dries, and it's acrylic too. And then I paint the whole thing yellow and squeegee with a rubber tool the red square. And then after that, paint the whole field blue, and then scrape away back from the blue to the yellow.
And were you thinking at this time about kind of riffing off of geometric abstraction? How did that come into play in your work?
Like who? Like Albers, you mean? Or I know a favorite was Al Held. Yeah. let me think. I kind of copied Al Held for a while, way back in Berkeley. I think you can see a little Al Held in this, actually, yeah.
So during this period, you're living in New York, and you become close friends with Gordon Mutta Clark, Norman Fisher, Jackie Windsor. And then subsequently, you end up losing two of those friends to cancer, Norman Fisher and Gordon Mutta Clark.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And why did you decide to move back to San Francisco? You moved back to San Francisco at that time.
Yeah, that's right. Well, it was a dark side time, and we lost also Susie Harris, this really cool, my generation artist. The unfortunate combination of booze and drugs, and then Gordy was sick for a while, and the whole gang was. Norman was our really, really good friend because he was our drug dealer. and the drug was, I guess it was blow, that was what we were doing. And it was a whole scene around his house. It was really fun. And then he got melanoma, skin cancer. And so it was dark. We lost them all right around that time. And so I decided to move back to San Francisco. And I went back and taught at the Art Institute in San Francisco. It was great. That was a great experience. San Francisco's great. I came back here, ran into a neighbor, and we fell in love, so then I moved back here.
And your work kind of shifts as you come back here in that period, and you start making the pink and black
Pink and black,
paintings.
right. Oh, yeah, then that's all kind of about that relationship. Okay, so no, that's interesting. In San Francisco, I'm living right up the hill from Tower Records, which had all the imported music from England, and we're talking the mid-'70s. So I found out about Brian Eno, who was a huge inspiration, and I liked the songs, the music he was doing, Taking Tiger Mountain by Strategy, these songs that had this really elaborate narrative, which sort of didn't make much sense. But the combination of the language and the music told the story in a kind of abstract way. And then I wanted my paintings to tell a story, so I made this big painting, in a little, fairly big, but little for this painting, apartment in San Francisco on the side of Nob Hill. It was really cool. And I called it Save the Last Dance for Me. And it was pink and black, which was a hip color at that time in the punk world. It was also hip in my teenage years in the sort of Latin Pachuco crossover world. And then I love that song. And so that song was sort of about my new boyfriend that I had that was back here in New York. And so, and it's huge. It's as big as these walls here almost, Save the Last Dance for Me. Oh, yes, we do have that. This is part of the story, but here it is, Save the Last Dance for Me. And then I showed it at Holly Solomon. So then I'm with Holly Solomon, and I just got trashed in the reviews. They said, wow, what is she thinking, how, I have it, I should, but I really was sort of proud and some dirty words, they didn't say them, but a jerk to make a big pink painting like that. Yeah, because it relates to color field and geometric abstraction and serious art, but it was pink.
Were you thinking? Were you thinking about those colors, pink and black, as gendered?
I don't think I really thought of that. I was thinking of the club culture. And Save the Last Dance for Me, that was the Drifters. That was a cool part of my life, too. They were still going on, but... and in San Francisco, the punk scene was huge. the Mabuhay Gardens was this really great place. Sex Pistols played there when I was there, not in another place. So it was really a big influence, that counterculture. Oh,
so here's...
this is a little later.
Yeah. This is the painting Rosebud on the right
Yeah.
from 83.
Right.
That has a really interesting story. And you've talked about beginning at this time, going through this difficult phase of friends dying and sort of seeing content or reading content into your work.
Right.
And this painting has been described, even though it, of course, plays with geometric abstraction, as also dealing with the idea of wounds or blood.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could talk about that.
Yeah, that's and that's sort of, that was the love affair, that important love affair ended. So Rosebud is sort of about that. And also I come out of a Catholic tradition, which has been a great influence. So this kind of relates to martyrdom and blood and that kind of stuff that that really formed my sensibility as a kid. And so, what else? So it did have this, it was called Rosebud, which also speaks to the movie, right, Orson Welles movie. And then the one on the left is called Ophelia, out of Hamlet, and that's a similar kind of dark, sad story. Yeah, I was bummed, I was sad.
That painting, Rosebud, though, it also has another story, which is that at that time you met the art dealer Pat Hearn.
Oh, that's going to make me cry.
Yeah, and visited her gallery deep in the East Village.
Right.
And she came to see this painting, and that was the beginning of you working together.
Yeah, that's a great story. I got Ross Bleckner to come over because I had met him around, and so he loved the work, so we fell in love. And so he said, I know the dealer for you. And so he went over and he got on the phone and he said, I got a great artist for you. And he said, no, it's a woman. Cool. She said, who is it? So she came over and she stood in front of Rosebud totally still for the longest time, looking at it. And then she came back the next day and the next day. Wow. Oh, and there weren't any other women in the gallery. That was part of the deal. It was all guys. So, and the reason I wanted to be in Pat's gallery was because I had been over there on 9th Street. I saw Philip Taft, Peter Schoof, who's now in the Biennial. Really, I thought they were really great. They're doing painting, regular painting, and it was really good. And then where it was, way over 9th and Avenue D, was so cool. And then she was awesome. So we really did a lot of great shows together. We showed Save the Last Dance for me there, and she sold it.
Wow.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, she sold it to Philip Niarchos, the Greek ship guy. Yeah, I forgot. That was pretty radical. Because I remember everybody, it was still mostly guys. And then I was kind of older, 10 years older than they were, too.
Oh. So what happens next?
Let's see. Oh, well, this is called Reenido. And this is the beginning, and as like Ophelia was, too, of cutting up the canvas and making diptychs. So then again, we've got structure as part of the image again.
So you start working with these shaped canvases that are joined together.
Right. This one actually is a rectangle, but it's fake shaped. Whoops, okay, that's cool.
Oh, okay. So then we get into this work, which seems to relate to your childhood. And you spent the years when you were between the age of 7 and 13, growing up in Los Angeles.
That's right, yeah.
And I've talked about, was the surf culture and the beach sort of a lasting leitmotif in your work?
That's right.
This work is from later, right?
This is later, but the waves have been around. Remember Moonlight Sea from when I first transitioned over into painting. My dad, we used to go to the beach in San Francisco, at Kelly's Cove it was called, and the water is really cold there, and in fact, that's where wetsuits got invented. But they didn't have wetsuits, so everybody'd go swimming in this icy water, and it was a cool scene. Then, as the years went on, it was, it was a big part of my identity. Yeah, I looked at the ocean, sure, yeah. And the waves in the ocean are still in my work.
Yes.
The piece on the right is an interior, thinking about a room and a little different thing. Let's see what we got here. Well, you want to talk?
So this piece on the left is called "Looks Like Music." I was
Right.
thinking what you just mentioned a minute ago about thinking about the abstract structure of music, and how you sort of juxtapose these two elements with the web and the geometry that's on the right. Does it relate to that idea about music that you just talked about?
Yeah. And I'm also starting to techno music is starting to happen, and I'm thinking about that when and I'm always listening to the radio and hearing what was the newest thing on WBAI. It used to be in the morning while I'd be painting, and so that the music inspired the work, yeah, and then the structure of the work.
Mm-hmm. And what's the piece on the right?
Let's see, what is that called? Actually, that's called The Third Man, another movie. Just sort of out of the blue, that title.
Mm-hmm.
But it's supposed to be streetlights, like the streetlights. That movie's black and white, so you had to use your imagination. But there's a lot of paintings like this that are about that are sort of color field painting, which we hated, but are geometric abstraction, and then also kind of have a connection to reality.
So you hated color field painting at the time?
Well, when that was from the 60s,
Yeah.
and that was the thing to hate. It actually was awesome. Yeah, like if you liked it, you just... Oh, and then when we got to New York, to Max's, that gang, they all hated it, too. Yeah. This is a current piece. It's called the Cup Shelf. And, yeah, we just shipped it away yesterday to a collector. And I started deciding to make my ceramic works into sculpture. And I forgot until just the other day that, that's what Chaim Steinbeck was doing 20 years ago. And he's got to show up now. I got to go see. But anyway, that's a sculpture. And it speaks to home decor and the domestic and that sort of thing. It's kind of Jasper Johns, too, in a way.
Yeah, and maybe it relates back to that early work that involves the window panes and ironing.
Yes.
In that sense.
Yeah.
Domestic themes.
And that comes out of my growing up with my mom always rearranging all the furniture constantly.
She did.
And then the house was full of very, very loved, valuable figurines, we called them. And they were full of emotional power, the kind of thing you'd really look down on if you were, a cool modernist. But they were great, and so that I'm playing with that concept too now.
So like Catholic figurines or just?
No, they were Dresden figurines, unbelievable ceramic, unbelievable craftsmanship with big lace dresses and stuff. I heard that Jeff Koons came out of that kind of environment. Not, I think maybe
That's
a little more modernist than we were in the 40s. Don't tell him I said that. But the way my mom was completely rearranging, hanging paintings on the wall and stuff is an important psychological influence.
Interesting.
And then when I got hip and smart and cool, of course I was kind of ashamed of that, but now I'm thinking about that.
What is this piece, Mary?
This one is called Good Vibrations. This is from the show in London. a couple of years ago, and it turns out that the diptych was once two separate paintings, and then I decided to hang them. Actually, we sold one of them, the one that was called Weave. It's a frame, and then the guy didn't want it anymore, so I bought it back. And then I put it together with this one, and then I've been making these spots out of ceramic.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been thinking about the idea of hallucinations as subject matter for art, for my art. So this is an idea of like when you're staring at a painting, and all of a sudden it all starts flying all over the wall.
Oh, wow. Mm.
And so now that was in 2012. People are starting to think of me as an installation artist, so that's cool. And it is a big thing of my kind of painting. The picture inside wasn't really what my paintings were about. It was it was about both, the picture inside and how the thing was in the room.
Mm.
Yeah.
So you talk about at the end of the book All Night Movie about seeing yourself as this kind of Joan of Arc figure, isolated, and how that's no longer true. Is that how you moved into those installation practices?
Right. I'm zooming along because I wanted
Sorry,
to...
we can go back to that too.
Yeah.
Or we can
They're cool, but...
go back to that question.
I'm looking for the chairs, but anyway, we'll see the chairs in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Yeah, as time went along and I started really valuing the social part of being an artist, because it came from, having really wonderful dealers and people like going to galleries because I knew the people and liked them. And that's right, I came into it with a real contentious, fighty kind of attitude, and then just evolved into loving the fact of the community, fitting in really with relational aesthetics, and then the fact that I guess probably because of computers and digital images flying all over the world, that there is this real art community, which is massive, that we didn't really have before. So, like I was at the Modern yesterday, it was just mobbed with people talking and hanging out, and it didn't used to be like that. Museums were quiet.
So are you a fan of the more noisy museum?
It was well, now I'm going to try to pull a few strings and get to go to the biennial when the museum is closed.
Mm-hmm.
But and we were looking at, what were we looking at yesterday? Van Gogh. I hardly even remember that. I mean Gauguin. Sorry. I'm so
The Gauguin show.
Yeah, I'm so ignorant. But I was having a hard time, and I was with a person that was going to write about it, and she was really paying attention, and I'm looking around at the people and trying to listen to what they're saying about it.
Yeah, it's distracting, right?
Yeah, it was kind
But
of
you
fun.
like that component of it. Mm-hmm. So in these pieces as well, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about, these juxtapositions or combinations.
Right.
And you've talked about being interested in kind of logic games or mathematics in that way.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that? What that means for you, fitting
it-
things together?
It is kind of about nonverbal logic, nonverbal math, and I don't know that much about it, but and then again organizing things in terms of the way the structure of music feels. Yeah. I'll go back to this guy. This is called Roseville. This was from way back in the 70s when I'm making those red, yellow, and blues, which are made by taking the paint away and then making other kind of structures by adding the squares, painting it on, or actually making the physical squares. And it says, and I think about if somebody has a painting like this or is somewhere they're looking at it, they can kind of put it together and take it apart and kind of have a kind of narrative with it. And then that's another thing from being little, looking at paintings that when you're really little, you don't know exactly what it's a picture of, but you look at the parts of it and in a kind of abstract way. So that's the kind of thing that's behind this.
These pieces also are related to those juxtapositions,
Right.
combinations of perspective, the
Right.
floorboards combined with that grid format.
That's right. And they relate, one of them's called Woody's Truck Stop, which was it's actually a place down in New Jersey. There's another one called Barstow, which is, it's all about driving around, taking road trips. And then, yeah, kind of put together in this kind of semi-logical way, or illogical.
You talked about being interested in Asian space. What
That's
does that
right.
mean?
Oh, that kind of relates to this, like looking at, again, looking at the thing and reading the different kinds of spaces, flat space, three-dimensional space, the actual, that's right, that came up the other night when talking about Palermo and also Barnett Newman being compared to that Palermo really looked at Newman, and those guys were both looking at the room as part of the content of the painting that was hanging on the wall. And this kind of thing is really about that, too. Like, almost like drawing on the wall. And then being shaped like that, too. The corners that are not canvas are part of the thing.
What are these pieces?
And then the one, if you stare, it looks like if you stare at the dots, they start jumping around. Pretty much plain abstract. One interesting thing is the color that in the work around this time, especially the one on the right, owes quite a bit to the colorist and the guys that make The Simpsons are really good colorists. So for a while, I was getting a lot of inspiration from watching The Simpsons. I'm kind of over it now.
There's a chair.
Here's relational aesthetics. So this happened, I made some fabric at the fabric workshop, and then I wanted to make an upholstered chair, like a club chair. And we made a slipcover for the chair out of the cloth, and then it wasn't very comfortable. It was like, oh, and the chairs are also sort of owing something to Donald Judd. He made good chairs. However, my chair was made out of plywood and wasn't very comfortable. So we decided to put this webbing on it to make it comfortable. Then it looked so good with the webbing that we just let the upholstery go.
Oh.
And so this happened, and then when I've been making chairs for over 10 years now, and I always put them in my show, and the idea is so that people will sit down and stay a while. It works. And then the other thing about it, the first time I showed the chairs was at the Secession in Vienna, and which is theoretically cool, because that's one of the first art places that was made for regular people to go and look at art. And so then the chairs were all floating around in there, and they're on wheels. So you can sit down in the chair, then you see someone over there you like, you can just kind of roll over there and say hi, and that's what happened. It was in the summer, and all these tourist kids were there, and they're all sitting in the chairs, checking each other out. And they did look at my art once in a while, too. And so this was the show in London. And so they were all around in that show, and then I took these guys' picture.
It's a great photo.
I love it, yeah. And there's little chairs for little guys, but most grown-ups can fit in them, too.
Can you talk a little bit more, for those who are unfamiliar, what you really mean by that idea of relational aesthetics?
Well, mainly like this, again, the social part of being an artist, and let me think now. And I'm not that smart about theory, but the fact that we went to the show at the Guggenheim, and what that was about, that's what that was about, talking to people about art. And then art having a kind of a whole different function than it did before.
Mhm.
That you don't just stand and look at it, you talk about it.
Mhm.
That's what was going on in the modern yesterday.
Mm.
I mean, the other thing of going into a beautiful, quiet, we went into the Parish Museum out in Southampton in Watermill the other day, and it was a Sunday, nobody was in there, Sunday in March in Southampton, and it was an amazing show with places to sit down and a wonderful way to look at work,
Mm.
quiet.
Yeah. So both of those
Yeah,
have a place.
yeah.
Mhm.
That's probably going to evolve too, that they'll be like small, quiet places to look at art.
You think?
Galleries are like that
Mhm.
sometimes. They should have benches in them, though.
It's true.
Yeah. This is from before. That's a photo. It looks good, but it's a photo from the side. It's probably given me an idea here. We did this. We had a show in and I think we. It wouldn't have been we before. Wonderful small-scale gallery in Munich, different from Hauser Wirth in New York or Larry Gagosian. So that's nice to watch out for to try to find connections with more intimate kind of galleries. And so this had this showing the cup with the frame painting as a concept.
When you said we, did you mean the people in your studio or the gallery, or what was the collective?
It would be both.
Mhm.
It would be the dealer, the people that would come to the show, and it is that on all the places where I show.
Mhm.
The social part and the friend part of it is really important.
Mhm.
You know, even like I've been, going through reading Text zur Kunst came, which is super theoretical, intense, theory speak. It seems like it's really worth it, this issue, because it's about speculation and art making and the whole enterprise of art.
That's kind of scary. Speculation art.
Yeah, it looks like, as far as I can understand so far, some people hello, Damien
Yeah.
Hirst, yeah. He started it, ish. I don't know, Picasso was kind of busy too, wasn't he? And this is more about like waves and hallucinations again.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't want to,
Do we have some photos of your studio, maybe?
yeah. That
Oh,
was,
another piece with the
yeah,
chairs.
this was the show in Munich.
Mhm.
These are like ocean paintings. This is my studio in Long Island, the end of the day.
That's also from your
Long
Bridgehampton,
Island, yeah,
Long Island studio.
yeah.
When we talked about a year ago, you were saying that what you were thinking about was really the earth and the sky. That was what was on your mind. Is that still on your mind?
Yeah, because this place has, I'm out in the outdoors a lot, and I'm down at the beach and looking at the ocean, and so the ocean's showing up, not so much the sky. This one's called Surfing on Acid.
Great
And-
title.
Yeah, and then when I had the show in Laguna Beach, in Newport Beach, this guy said, I did that. I didn't. And this is a cool autobiographical thing. This is this big painting called Fire and Ice, which is, and it's in the museum in San Francisco. So that was cool. There's a big piece in the paper today about the museum is getting bigger, so they're going to close it for a couple of years. But this was huge when that happened, when it went back to my hometown.
Mhm.
You can tell I'm happy. That really is something. They're really interested in, showing the work of people that. And then these are road paintings. This is a road painting, two-lane blacktop, and that's something I've been thinking about a lot.
You're going to say that really is something showing people from the
San
area.
Francisco, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Gary Garrels was
Mm-hmm.
really interested in me very much because of that.
Mm.
And then I went out when they showed Richard Serra's drawing show that was here at the Met in San Francisco. So that's really very personal and a neat way to look at being an artist. And then the other thing is in fact, that's an interesting thing. I'm looking at the community of art that's going on out in Long Island is good. It's small and you can know a lot of people. What's going on upstate in Hudson,
Mm-hmm.
out in Brooklyn,
Mm-hmm.
they don't keep raising the rent.
So the idea of the local,
Yeah.
as it applies to art as well.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
This is called Surprise, another kind of road idea. I wasn't an acid head, but I was right in the middle of that culture. This is cool. This is in my studio now, and Laurie Anderson came over, and she said, "Oh, that looks like Pro Tools. That's the program that on the computer that you use to mix music, and it kind of looks like this."
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I can see that.
This is a diptych. It's just brand new, and I dumped the bucket in Photoshop to make it to show what it is, but I wasn't too good at it. So it's kind of an abstract expressionist version of Photoshop. But this is something that'll end up being a piece, a ceramic piece, sculpture next to a canvas, painting on canvas.
Oh, I see. So that's a ceramic piece
On
on
the
the
left,
left.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I just finished that. I was all proud of it. That's why I stuck it in. Oh, here's the studio. And that's just from the other day.
So this
Oh.
is your Bridgehampton studio.
Yeah, and so it's really small, and the studio in New York's about the size of this room, and I don't really paint there. I do most of my work in the country now. And
So you
this
can
is,
see a poster there from the show in Bonn that was last year.
Right.
Is that right? Where you placed your work alongside of Blinky Palermo's.
right.
What gave you the idea to do that?
Well, David, my pal, David Reed introduced me to the guys that run the museum in Bonn, and they said they wanted to do a show with me. And so they have a huge Palermo collection there, and I said, "Oh, why don't we do Mary Heilmann and Blinky Palermo," which is like a total dream come true, because I came into this art world where he and all those Dusseldorf guys were huge. No girls allowed, except a couple, Eva Hess and a few other people. But anyway, it happened, and the name of the show is called Mary Blinky Yay. And that's the poster with the big red spot on it.
Rosebud.
Yeah, and Rosebud, yeah.
Mm.
And then the collector that was going to loan Rosebud, then he wouldn't loan it. He
Oh, no.
changed his mind and he moved to New Zealand. And he said, "Oh, I'm sorry, it's on a boat going to New Zealand." So we made this little Photoshop thing, the thing that's leaning next to the painting, and we called it Substitute.
Oh, there it is, yeah.
It's cute. It was great working with those guys, really tough PhD German guys, and they're all talking about feminism.
Really?
Yeah, like feminism is big in Germany now. It's so cool. That's why this happened, probably.
So this is your New York studio.
Right.
Ceramic pieces on the table here, and your chairs.
Oh, yeah, those are the spots. The tables are something I make, too. I make a lot of chairs.
Oh, those are the spots from that piece.
Yes,
So-
right.
Mhm.
They shipped them back from London. And so this used to be the studio where I did all my work. It's an old-fashioned New York studio. And then behind that blue painting with the line used to be a window that looked out at the river. But they built a building there.
Sad.
This is the new museum show. That was in '07, '07, '08.
Mm-hmm.
And, yeah, that worked out. That was great. Like, it's really a lucky magic gift to get to see all your work in one place.
Mm. And that show was called To Be Someone.
That's
What
right.
What did that title mean for you?
Well, that's a song. The one I like was by, let's see, I'm blocking on their name, but anyway, to be someone is such a wonderful thing. And the thing is, like, to do all this art all the time was to have an identity and to be someone. And so it worked out. And significantly, the reason it worked out was not that I was like 10 times better than a lot of other people, but that through the different friendships and relationships that happened from being in the art world for 40 years, Pat Hearn, Ross Bleckner, Richard, Bryce Martin, like all of these people, Lisa Phillips, and all like the trustees from the new museum, who a lot of them live out in Long Island, came to visit me, and they said, oh yeah, we should do a show with her. So that it happened in a real social kind of way.
Mm.
I was good enough, but a lot of people are good enough.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes a good story.
Well, thank you, Mary.
Yeah, thank you.
Maybe.